Ladies and gentlemen, NSBA now brings you our feature presentation.
So this area here is actually a really important area for my family. So the building with the red brick on the top, that's my father's clinic. All the time growing up, my dream was I actually wanted to become a doctor. I already even had the room in my dad's office picked out and where my office would be. But as I got to be around 12, 13, 14, my passion for the community and my passion for economic development, my passion for international, and that entrepreneurial spirit that's kind of in my gut, it was there. And I switched my mind to say, I really want to be, in business.
I still remember the day he got the job, summer job, at the gas station in Davison. And he went to work. The second day, the owner of the gas station came and noticed that the washroom facility is spotless, clean. And he was surprised. He said, who did this? And Murad said, I did it. And so he was very impressed, And the first time the owner went for holidays, he appointed Murad at the age of 15 as acting manager of the Husky station.
My mother tells me that, I've always been entrepreneurial. I started my first business when I was 4 years old, actually. We used to go to Turkey in the summer times for vacation, and I saved my allowance, getting ready to go to Turkey.
From Turkey, he brought a gum, Turkish gum. They went like a hotcake here.
First day of school was the best day in the world for me because I actually had a store from which to sell my candy. Made 5 times my money, and I think that's the start of the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm particularly proud of my mother. She came to Davidson as a young bride in 1967, and by 1976 she'd learned English, and she was the second ever elected rural municipal councillor in Saskatchewan. If you think of the 1970s, a woman, immigrant, Muslim, elected to a rural council, she spent 27 years as a RM councillor, the reeve of the RM, town councillor, mayor of Davidson. It was very important to us. Jobs on Main Street was a point of discussion, at our dinner table.
We were given the right outlook tools, I think, by our parents to view the world, view opportunities, and to capitalize on those opportunities when they presented themselves.
We met in our 4th year. Murad sat at the front of the room and was an active participant in the class and freely shared his opinions, wasn't afraid to start a discussion. We actually ended up having a fight in class one day. He didn't realize he was fighting with me, but I left class not thinking that he was a great guy.
I remember an aggressive argument. I thought that, she was definitely all wrong.
And I found out afterwards that he had told a friend of ours that he was going to date me, and our friend laughed at him.
So the next day I sat across the table. The next day I sat closer and closer and closer. And, over the course of about a week, I met her and realized we were in classes together, realized quickly that she didn't like me. And she'll say that I wore her down over 3 years. And 3 years later, we started dating. And we've been together now 21 years. The mid-1990s weren't an easy time, and I decided I wanted to continue on with my education. And so I looked at, what are the top international business schools in the world? And, there was a school in Arizona called Thunderbird. It was the #1 program in the world. Harvard was 2, Wharton was 3, Columbia was 4. And, I applied to the top 5 schools in the world in international business, and I got rejected from all 5. But Thunderbird was one that, was such a unique program. I really wanted to go. And so every day for 2 weeks, I phoned the registrar of the college. And one day I was lucky, his assistant was sick that day, and he actually answered the phone. And he said, what, you've intrigued me, young man, with your perseverance. I'll give you 15 minutes to tell you why I should get in. And, went down and, gave it everything I had and got myself into the college, did very, very well. And that was the start of the career. Yeah, getting done Thunderbird was, part of it, but I really needed to get some international experience. And, one of my goals actually initially was I really wanted to get into the Foreign Service. So I wanted to be a diplomat. I wanted to represent Canada in the world. And so I actually applied for a job at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. And then, that passion for the province, kept pulling me back. So I wrote a letter to Premier Roy Romano. And I said, you know what? The province has so much to offer to emerging markets, and emerging markets trade development is the world future. And I think we should have an emerging markets trade strategy. And one day, my phone rang, and it was the Deputy Minister to the Premier of Saskatchewan. He said, you know what, young man, if you can do what you say you're gonna do, you're gonna be very successful in government. And so I moved back to Saskatchewan. I traded in, Bay Street and Wall Street for Victoria Avenue, and spent the next 6 years in emerging markets trade development for the province. Great training ground for my entrepreneurial journey. One day I was at the Canadian Embassy in Ankara, Turkey, and the Canadian ambassador said to me, there's an importer in Turkey called Arbel, the Arslan family, and they're a big importer of lentils, and they're taking a big amount of Canadian product, and they're very unhappy with Canada. So could you fly down there and take a look and help us to figure out what the problem is? So I flew down, showed up on the Arslan family's doorstep. I was, 25-year-old kid, and I spoke Davidson Turkish, and so that was kind of very intriguing to them that a young man from the Canadian government showed up and spoke Turkish, and I tried to figure out what the problem was. And the problem was that we were new to growing lentils, and the quality of Canadian product wasn't being graded properly, and the Canadian Grain Commission needed to have a grading standard that met the international standard. So I helped to resolve that, and that was the start of a relationship with the largest single importing company in the world, Arbel. And as the Canadian lentil industry continued to develop, it became apparent to me that in order to truly drive it, we needed to go community to community and convince farmers to grow red lentils in addition to the green lentils they were currently growing. And so I did what every responsible 28-year-old kid does. I went to my wife, Michelle. She was 6 months pregnant with our twins. I quit my $100,000 a year government job. I moved to the basement of my house and wrote a business plan on how to build a food processing company based on lentils, peas, chickpeas, beans, and staple foods.
Yeah, he quit his government job while I was pregnant with twins and moved to the basement of our house on July 1st, 2001.
A big gap in the strategy was I didn't have any capital. So I convinced the Arslan family to be one of the founding investors, but we needed local investors. We wanted to have local presence for the company in addition to myself. And so, I went to my father and I said, Dad, I need 10 of the most trusted farmers that we know as family, and I need to go and sit down with them at their dinner tables and talk about what's right and wrong with the ag industry.
He was sort of going around to his friends and neighbors and trying to raise some cash. And he was a young guy, like early 30s, maybe 31, something like that. And he came to Dad and myself and my brother and said, look, I've got this opportunity. I think lentils are going to be the next big thing. Just grow red lentils. It's going to be fantastic.
I was competing against, the Saskatchewan Wheat Pools, the Agricor Uniteds, the Cargills of the world. They were household names. I was a startup.
We passed on it, right? Like, there's a lot of dreamers out there, and Murad's always been a big talker, but this was a big, big change in prairie agriculture.
Didn't quite work out with local investors because, I was young. It was a big sell to, be able to start up a company like that and become globally successful.
I was the second employee after Murad. I was a young mom, and I took a leap of faith to come work for him. I was with a large corporation with a steady paycheck, and I came to this startup company. And when I actually signed my employment contract in his living room of his house, and I had this little voice inside of me going, is this the right idea? Am I doing the right thing? But I felt like it was a really cool opportunity. We grew really fast, and that could be a problem. We had a very small operating line, so we were juggling money for the first couple of years, and it was difficult. We had some weeks where we weren't sure if payroll was going to clear, and we had farmers that we had to pay within 10 days because we committed to farmers that we will pay you in 10 days because that's how you earn their trust.
When Murad's company first came in, I think they were the first guys that sort of said 10 days after unload, they'll pay. And that was a big change. But they have to have so much money in the background so that they can float lines of credit because they've got lentils all the way from Turkey to Davidson that they have to be paying for inventory. And as a farmer, I'm not letting go of them until I get paid.
We had to delay payments, which we really didn't want to do, but we would pick a few farmers that were maybe close to Murad that he could call them and say, look, you know, we're just waiting on this payment from this person, and once that money comes in, we'll pay you. So we had to have a really good personal relationship with the farmers.
You know, back home here in Davidson, I had a lot of flexibility from families like Jared's where, you know, they would deliver and they would keep delivering until we got to the end of a contract, and they wouldn't ask for their money until the end of a contract, actually. So at the end of the day, the prosperity of the farm and the prosperity of the community depends on our ability to marry the supply and the demand for pulses.
Part of their business was buying out companies that didn't do it as well. So when they were able to buy a company for 50 cents on the dollar or whatever it was just a risky venture. But when he asked us, would you grow lentils? That's our business. We understand that completely and the risks. Murad, he's a sharp guy, smart guy, known him all my life, but would I give him $50,000 at 31? Probably not. but now it's a good investment, and we'll do that all day.
You know, early on in the company, I think that, you know, we didn't recognize all of the challenges we'd have. Lentils had never been split in a cold weather climate in the world. You know, water is actually a really important part of the process in traditional processing. And so I remember the day, January 30th, 2003, you know, the first day that we're gonna split lentils, and we bring the lentils in from the silo. It's minus 37 degrees Celsius that day. When they applied the water, we had a problem. All we had was ice everywhere.
So first of all, these poor technicians came from Turkey, had no idea what minus 40 meant. So the poor guys were just hating life, you could tell. We actually took them to a Rough Rider game. We took them to the Labor Day game, thinking this would be a treat for them. Well, these poor guys were sitting there freezing. So people-wise, it was a challenge, getting them accustomed to our climate. And then technology-wise, their technology wasn't designed to work in minus 40 weather.
We had to develop a dry processing technology here that had never been done anywhere else in the world.
The first lentils, they were no bigger than a Coke can, right? Like, they were horrible. We didn't have the rollers on the farm, so we learned we had to roll all of our land, otherwise you took stones into your combines. We didn't have proper flex headers on the combines. It was just a complete step change that you didn't have any of this absolutely necessary equipment that you needed to do a proper job of growing.
You know what, we managed our best with the technology that we had. So we had, you know, peeling, splitting, polishing. We had color sorters that could select the poor colors out. And, you know, we got through the year. And so, you know, weather volatility was kind of one of the, you know, first things that I learned. And then as the company continued along, took the company public in 2007. So we were a really small public company. And that was August of 2007. And then 2008, the US financial crisis. And so from that perspective, you know, those are times where I turned around and said, boy, here I am, a little public company trying to grow. And, you know, the whole world is economically melting down. And, you know, how exactly are we going to get through that?
Shares of AGT Food and Ingredients under some pressure today.
The giant lentil company.
Yes, lentils and pulses, but their pulse is still beating.
You know, well, we focused on our business. We focused on quality. We focused on, you know, driving margin out of the working capital that we did have. And we got through that first year, you know, in a profitable fashion. And then by 2009, we pulled the trigger and we actually bought Arbel, the company that had done the initial investment. So the Arslan family agreed to roll into the public company that I had formed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And we became a much bigger company almost overnight. And then we executed a strategy where we acquired 16 companies in 7 years in 5 continents to grow out to 41 manufacturing facilities located, you know, throughout all the growing regions of the world, and a sales and distribution to 120 countries.
It was on a trade mission to India where I probably got to know Murad a little bit better. We had known each other for some time, but you know, when you're on a trade mission in a far-off locale, you have a tendency to spend a little bit more time together than you otherwise would. And First of all, to watch the rapport he had with customers, which are customers for our farmers, for Saskatchewan, was wonderful. I understood immediately that Murad was a brand for our province, and a good one.
He's gone 150 to 200 days a year, so it's tough. That's the hardest thing I think about his job is the amount of time that he has to be away. So he really makes a conscious effort to not be away any longer than he has to be because he hates missing things with the kids. He hates missing football, he hates missing the choir or musical theater performances for our daughter. He likes to be home. He's a homebody.
You know, from that perspective, it's been a sacrifice for my family, my wife Michelle and Tarek and Sarah, my mom and dad. You know, it's been a sacrifice for all of them. But you know, what you got to do is you have to prioritize. And when you're home, you know, what you live for is your family and your business. And so, you know, I do feel like I've had to sacrifice a few things, like, you know, friendships and hobbies and you know, those kinds of things. But I wouldn't trade it for the world.
He's a karaoke singer. He actually shocked a lot of people at our wedding. He got up and sang with the band at our wedding, at the dance.
Yeah, you know what? I like to sing, actually. It's something that people don't know about me, and so if I, you know, have a few drinks and I'm somewhere where there's karaoke, you might see me behind the microphones. You know, music is something that's a bit of a release for me, and as I get older, I think I might one day get into a wedding band or something, or be a lounge singer. I'm not sure. That might be something I'll do in my spare time.
When he comes home, he's not the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He's Murad, my husband, and he's dad to my kids. And I mean, I get reminders when we go to functions, and I get to hear him speak. When he won the United Nations Award last year, that was an incredibly humbling experience.
Murad has been the recipient of many distinguished awards.
Mr. Al-Katib, would you please come to the stage?
Please give a warm welcome to the world's greatest lentil producer, Murad El Khatib.
As an entrepreneur, I don't do anything for awards. I think that, you know, one of the things that's really gratifying about it is, you know, I get to tell the Saskatchewan success story. And so, you know, the Oslo Business for Peace Foundation Award, you know, is one that was awarded by Nobel laureates in peace and Nobel laureates in economics. So, you know, being the first Canadian to ever receive that award, you know, gives me an opportunity to talk about sustainable agriculture, the environment, you know, the role that Canada has in food safety and the role that Saskatchewan has, you know, in the global village of providing that food, you know, safe food actually, and sustainable food to the world. And, you know, the United Nations agencies estimate there are over 62 million refugees in the world today. You know, 60% of those are women and children. So, you know, when I look at, you know, the problem at hand today, you know, truly the world's most vulnerable are displaced for no fault of their own. You know, they're hungry, you know, they don't have shelter. You know, these are problems that, you know, as a developed country and as a successful business, you know, it bothers me. It's something that I want to do something about. So that the provision of food and staple foods to refugees, you know, is a problem that, you know, we all have a responsibility to take a look at. So you know what, the United Nations is having problems right now. They're having problems in distribution. They're having problems in product loss. They're trying to take 13 or 14 different items, but they can't distribute them all individually. You know, if we could succeed in producing 7 or 8 of those items on a very big scale and take our global supply chain and take Saskatchewan lentils, Saskatchewan peas, Saskatchewan chickpeas, Saskatchewan durum wheat, send them over to our factory in Turkey, you know, produce with it bulgur wheat, pasta, lentils, peas, you know, chickpeas, white beans, put them together in a carton, then we could have the United Nations and the International Red Cross, Red Crescent distribute that parcel on a ration basis to a family. So every time period, they would get a ration. So instead of distributing it every day, they distribute a ration to a family, and that would sustain them for a period of time.
This is helping people globally who don't even have food They don't have toiletries, they don't have anything. So I think some of these awards that he's getting are recognizing that what we've put together is truly helping people in the world.
Last year we distributed 4.5 million cartons, which accounted for 700 million refugee meals.
I think that deserves an applause, doesn't it?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think that when I look at the critical elements for success in entrepreneurship, I mean, there's a couple things I'm going to point to. One is, you know, you got to have passion for what you do. But when I get down to something maybe a little bit less, you know, sexy, like passion, you know what, financial competency and capability is a really important thing. So when I look at, you know, entrepreneurs, you know, an ability to properly read a financial statement, to understand your profit and loss statement, to understand cash flows and cash flow generating capability. I mean, these are very, very important elements. You can't rely on your staff to tell you whether you're making money or not. You have to understand that.
Murad's head always working. Even when he's here coming to visit us, he always has his computer in his hand.
Like, he is a hard worker, going out, trying to figure out what his market is, raise money, keep all the balls in the air.
He understands that the world is a really big place and that the opportunities aren't necessarily just here, there's opportunities around the world.
You'd never suspect that somebody you used to drive around with and have fun with is going to be a multi-millionaire in the lentil industry that you've never heard of before, right?
You know, 15 years later, I love the fact I can go to any coffee shop in rural Saskatchewan and I could sit down at a table and farmers around there would want to sit at my table and talk to me about the markets. They may not all like me, right? But they respect the job that we've done for the communities. And that's been a really, really important part of, you know, being a successful entrepreneur in this province. And, you know, the business community is vibrant. So, you know, when I look at the Saskatoon business community, you know, NSBA, you know, I look at the history of that organization. And, you know, I remember dealing with the NSBA back in the mid-1990s. And, you know, NSBA was a private sector voice. You know, it was one that, you know, we used to go to talk about exporters and exporter challenges. That's where we would get our information. And that's been, you know, really effective to see those organizations, NSBA, STEP, Saskatoon Chamber, Regina Chamber, Saskatchewan Chamber. You know, these are all very important, you know, voices for the business community.
There is a modesty there. There is a hard work ethic, the likes of which you won't find beat, I don't think, maybe not matched. So yes, this individual who is modest, who is hardworking but very humble, literally, you're right, has his product on the dinner tables of families all over the world. It's not hyperbole, that's exactly the case. In our province alone, 600 families have a career and a job as a result of his vision and the risk he took when he started out, when I don't know if anyone gave him a lot of chance for success. Over 2,000 employees worldwide, and that's amazing. And yet if you meet him and you just talk to Murad, you just never know that he's had all this success. And I think that's a quintessential Saskatchewan thing.
You know, let's face it, in the end, we are going to be remembered with the good things we did. And Murad is one of those young men. He fulfilled all those good things, not only to people, which he fed thousands of them, not only that, to his family, his mother and father, his brother, our daughter, everybody. You know, he has a big heart for everybody.
You know, I think that I never really put my mind to, you know, would I be a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company CEO? You know, but it did hit home. I mean, this year in the, you know, Saskatchewan Business Top 100, we were number 9, and number 10 was SaskTel. So, you know, when I passed SaskTel, I was like, well, wait a minute, SaskTel is a legacy company in this province. And now I take it as, you know, a responsibility. And, you know, Sir Winston Churchill said once, the price of greatness is responsibility. You know, or he said, history will be kind to me for I intend to write it. And, you know, these two quotes are kind of ones that really form a basis for how I view, you know, my go-forward path. I now have a responsibility to the families that work in our company. I now have a responsibility, you know, to society at large. And history, I hope, will be kind to me because we're controlling our destiny. we want to keep on this path of, you know, success, but with our communities in mind. And I think that that's really important as we go forward. It lets me sleep well at night. You know, I can look in the mirror and feel great about my business. And you know what? I'm in the food business. There's not a lot of downside here.
Tell the story of my first protest. And so I was 12 years old and I organized a group of my buddies to protest against a town bylaw outlawing motorcycles.
And all his friends had one. And then it was like a gang. They will go around Davidson. You know, population was aging. Seniors were complaining, too much noise.
I still remember being, 12 years old, and, right around the statue, we were marching around the statue and we were protesting against, the town passing a bylaw that we couldn't ride our motorbikes.
His friends going around the town hall and picketing. And then phone is, in my chamber, phone is ringing. Saskatoon and Regina television stations wants to come and do the interview because they hear this picketing going on, and the fellow who organized that is the mayor's son.
And so that was my first time on television. It was CBC National News, a group of young kids who were, politically active, protesting against the town bylaw.
And of course, I didn't know what to do. But, the bylaw was bylaw. And I stick to it. And finally, we sell Murad's motorcycle.
You sold it?
We sold it.